Let me jump right in and tell you about my year-long marriage journey from 2020 to 2021. I want to apologize up front if things seem a bit jumbled or if anything's unclear. 2020 was rough for a lot of folks, and wouldn't you know it, I found myself tripping into yet another one of 2020's pitfalls. I rushed into a marriage with the person I trusted more than anyone else. So here's how it all unfolded. On January 1st, 2020, I received a text from an old acquaintance I hadn't seen since my freshman year of college. She said, "Hey, I miss you." Looking back, if I could change one thing about that year, it would be letting her messages get under my skin and allowing her into the life I'd worked so hard to create. Back in college, I had a bit of a crush on her, but I never imagined it would turn into anything serious. She had a track record of unsuccessful relationships and seemed like the type who didn't really want any serious connections with anyone. I know, a major blunder on my part. After university, I've been working full-time for 2 years driven by principles like discipline, hard work for rewards, commitment, and taking things seriously. Of course, I have my own imperfections too, because no one's perfect, but let's get back to the story. Over the next few months, our texting was nonstop, and she started visiting every other weekend. She would drive 4 hours just to spend time with me, and we felt genuinely happy together. She was really pushing me to propose and get married as quickly as possible. When that approach didn't work, she suggested a promise ring. Her persistence, combined with my newfound intense emotions and love, brought us to May 1st, 2020 when I proposed. The very next day, we headed to the courthouse to tie the knot. We were overjoyed. She promised to change her negative behaviors, and I felt confident that I knew her well. However, as time went on, I discovered there were deeper layers to her bad habits. For instance, she had a habit of smoking, and she assured me that she had quit. We even signed a rental lease together and moved into a house in the same city where I lived. Our excitement was through the roof as we set out to build the life we envisioned. We seemed to be on the same page about important matters like starting a family. Around a month into living together, just before May ended, I was lying on our bed while working from home. That's when I noticed her phone lighting up with notifications from Snapchat and Twitter. I remembered her passcode from a time she had told it to me, and it was so simple that I never forgot it. I punched in her passcode and glanced at the notifications, and what I saw left me utterly shocked. My entire body started trembling while we were still snuggled up, and she was asleep. Right then and there, I discovered that what she had told me about her job was a complete lie and a load of garbage. As I checked out the posts on Twitter, Snapchat, and some X-rated sites, the pieces of the puzzle quickly fell into place. My brand new wife, the one I had just married, had been live streaming online for the past 3 years or so. I was frozen on the bed, unsure how to react, but my trembling body caught her attention, and she woke up. She immediately noticed the paleness of my face, the lack of eye contact, and she asked what was wrong. I brushed it off with a nothing, but she persisted, concerned. "What's wrong, babe? Are you okay?" I finally asked, "What do you do for a living?" Immediately, I turned her phone towards her, revealing one of her detailed posts on Twitter where she was promoting her body for sale. Her response was both shocking and absurd. She retorted, "How do you think I made all that money so fast, staying up all night?" Yep, she was quick to shift her problems and lies onto someone else. That's just how she rolled. I understand that some people are fine with online streaming and whatever, but let me make it clear that this revelation was enough to shatter our relationship forever. The moments that followed were a blur of her crying on the bed, trying to hug and kiss me, apologizing, and promising she wouldn't do it again. She pledged to quit and do whatever it took to make me happy, insisting that the job was soul-destroying and whatnot. Yeah, I was all about forgiving her. So we continued working on building our marriage, even though trust was shattered. And they say when that happens, everything's pretty much shattered. I'd say don't get into the habit of constantly checking your phone. But, of course, I caught her secretly live streaming online and exchanging graphic messages with clients and friends with benefits. Even her psychiatrist, believe it or not, and off we went again. I forgave her once more. I've lost count of how many times I forgave her for lying and not keeping such a crucial promise, especially in such a sensitive situation. Must have been 2 or 3 times after May. Eventually, we decided to see a marriage counselor for a few months. Predictably, most of the work was assigned to her, dealing with her issues around needing to feel desired and loved by men and all that stuff. Let me tell you, we had the highest highs and the deepest emotional lows together during those good moments. Of course, our marriage seemed to be on the mend during the next few therapy sessions, but then all hell broke loose. I just lost it. On December 1st, she started texting her psychiatrist again, arranging vacations in exchange for prescriptions and cash, and oh yeah, sending explicit photos. I forgot to mention that I had a lengthy history of all these conversations. I had screenshots of all those texts. I remember that day well. I pretended to sleep, lying in the same bed as her. When the sun came up, I couldn't keep bottling up the hurt anymore. I sat down at my computer while she was still asleep, printed out the divorce forms, and filled them out quite fairly, considering all she had done. I woke her up and told her straightforwardly, "I need you to sign this." She looked so lost, so I had to explain that those were divorce papers. "You don't deserve someone like me," I said. "I've had enough of the lies. I can't trust you again, even if I wanted to. Let's save ourselves from more heartache and sign this." She started crying and had a breakdown, but that day I didn't get her signature. Unfortunately, her mom came over concerned about what was happening. I didn't spill all the details, just kept it simple. Our trust was shattered, and I couldn't trust her anymore. I made it clear that this was for the best. After a week of going back and forth, we finally talked, and she agreed to sign the papers. She wanted us to remain friends. Yeah, I said okay, let's stay friends. And I opened up another small part of my heart to her as a friend who still cared and helped her out a bit since her online streaming income had vanished. We had a key rule as friends who still shared a home due to our lease. No bringing anyone over, guys for her and women for me. We each had our own bedrooms, aiming to focus on our individual lives. Yet only 2 weeks later, on December 16th, I woke up randomly at 1 a.m. to find a text from her admitting she had a friend over. It was pretty clear it was a guy, and I felt disrespected. No response from her. I grabbed my phone, headed to the backyard, and managed to get a video of what was happening in her bedroom. If I'd waited just a few more seconds, things would have gotten even more intimate between them. Creepily, I knocked on the glass while filming her lies and deception, causing the guy to leave. It was perhaps the first time I yelled at her in the whole year of our marriage, letting her know what I thought of her actions. We argued and eventually reached a decision. We'd take over the lease until it ended in May 2021 and be responsible for the entire rent. I started looking for a new apartment and finally moved in this week, January 9th, 2021. Keep two things in mind. First, to remove my name from the lease, I had to pay the remaining half of the upcoming month's rent. We agreed she would reimburse me through a payment plan considering her irregular job situation. So she's back to streaming online now. I handed her the agreement yesterday, but she hasn't signed it yet. Another thing to consider is that I've moved all my belongings out of the house we shared except for my washer and dryer. I agreed to leave those with her until the end of January 2021. Now I'm wondering if I should stick to that deal given how she tends to make a fuss out of everything and doesn't let go easily. Anyway, on that same night, I finalized my move out. Just 10 minutes later, with only a 20-minute notice, she brings another guy over to rearrange some furniture. This guy is someone she met on Bumble, and she keeps emphasizing how successful and wealthy he is. That night, I ended up spending the night in a nearby motel because there was no electricity at my new place. I'm contemplating reaching out to her, but part of me wants to cut her off completely from my life. I found myself watching videos about cheating wives on YouTube and reading stories on Reddit. That's how I ended up here, sharing my own story about my unfaithful ex-wife. She deceived and manipulated me. I was the naive, nice guy who put in extra hours trying to stabilize our shaky relationship, yet I didn't get any support from her. Instead, I got hurt and disrespect even when things seemed fine. It's a relief we didn't have a wedding. I feel sorry for anyone she decides to manipulate in the future, because she's quite skilled at it. As for me, I've learned my lesson. I'm relieved it took me less than a year to see her true colors and figure out what she really wants to change about herself. No children involved, and aside from some furniture she got, all financial support came from my hard work. I can finally let go of this person for good, even if she were to come back on her knees. Hey, I miss you, miss. I've learned my lesson. If you've made it this far, you're all awesome and great listeners to my not-so-great writing. I hope to improve and provide more updates over time, but for now, I needed to vent and let off some steam. It's just so easy for her to find and sleep with another guy while I'm still in shock and confusion. Who on earth did I actually marry? To add to the mess, I stumbled upon something shocking in my wife's secret box. She insists it's not cheating, but I know better. My wife and I spent our entire relationship in California. We crossed paths during our college days, both just 19 years old. She pursued theater and movie acting, while I was studying behavioral psychology. She had a strong passion for acting in plays and aspired to make it big in movies. She already had a modeling gig or two under her belt, which added to her charm. I was immediately taken by her. After she graduated, we tied the knot. I continued my studies while she dived into any acting opportunities she could find. Her schedule was packed with rehearsals and performances, often keeping her away from home. Sometimes, I'd tag along to her rehearsals, but those invitations dwindled once she landed the lead role in a romantic comedy play. As this play took center stage, she became even more consumed by it. At this point, we had been married for 3 years. I asked if I could join her during one of these rehearsals, but she told me they were off limits, which struck me as odd. When the time came for the performance, she scored free tickets for her family to attend. Her mom, dad, sister, and I all showed up on the same night. She truly shined as a convincing actress, and her chemistry with the male lead was striking. However, what convinced me even more was the passionate kiss they shared at the end. While I had witnessed her on stage kisses before, this one felt different. My concerns felt validated when she directed her gaze at him instead of me once the show wrapped up. Her father's remark added to my concerns. He mentioned she could captivate any man's heart as if she were in love with him. We had the chance to meet the cast, but my wife's introduction of us to her male co-star was odd. While she properly introduced her parents, she only used our first names for her sister and me. It made us seem like friends or a couple. After a celebratory dinner, I expressed my worries to her that night. She openly admitted feeling a connection with him and having a great time throughout the play's preparations. I asked her to cut off all communication with him after the play's closing night. Her reaction was one of devastation, and she revealed that if I reconsidered, she intended to work with him again. The source of my discomfort was the on-stage chemistry that made me so uneasy, and she believed working with him could help her career flourish. During this opportunity, I questioned her further since she wanted me to reconsider. I inquired whether they spent time together without my knowledge, and she seemed a bit embarrassed but confirmed that they did. I asked why, and she mentioned rehearsing lines and having dinner. I probed whether it was like a date, and she responded that she didn't view it that way, though she wasn't sure about his perspective. I then asked if he knew I was her husband, and she said she introduced me, but I pointed out that she only used my name. She seemed confused and unsure if she had done that. After an uncomfortable silence, I expressed to her that I didn't want her to communicate with him or continue working alongside him. Her reaction was a mix of upset and anger. She argued that she shouldn't be controlled in this manner. I countered by explaining that this wasn't something she should oppose me on. It was about maintaining the truth and honesty in our marriage, ensuring that nothing would cause discomfort for either of us. Eventually, she agreed to stop talking to him. But a month later, after many prolonged absences, I suspected she might still be seeing him and engaging in activities without my knowledge. About 5 months later, my wife and I were spending some time together outdoors when she took an Instagram selfie without me. The photo included the back of our house and its location, which partly explains why the affair partner decided to jump our fence. The other reason is that my wife had supposedly stopped communicating with him for a few days, and he had now realized the reason behind it. This happened when he saw me and understood that she was married. I recognized him from the play, and my wife was in a state of panic, trying to assert that she hadn't seen him since the play's conclusion. When he realized she was betraying him, he hesitated to speak up. However, I made it clear that if he didn't want me to involve the police due to his trespassing, he needed to come clean about whether they were having an affair. Reluctantly, he admitted they were, but he mentioned that he hadn't heard from her since discovering she was married, and he wouldn't pursue her any further. After he left, my wife tried to discredit his claims. She told me he had been persistently trying to reconnect with her ever since the play ended. However, she had rejected his advances without explaining why, which apparently triggered his emotional outburst. As much as I wanted to trust her, I knew I couldn't just ignore what the affair partner had revealed. So I took matters into my own hands and decided to investigate further. I checked my wife's phone, and much to her chagrin, I found evidence of her conversations on WhatsApp. I forced her to log in, threatening divorce as leverage. Within those messages were the confirmation of their involvement. She had only stopped communicating with him for a mere 3 days, and the evidence pointed to them engaging in sexual activities at his house multiple times after their dates. Their relationship had escalated significantly since the play. I shared screenshots of these messages with her family before smashing her phone. Then I made the decision to kick her out. Despite her pleas for a second chance, she admitted that it was mere infatuation. She recognized that beyond their shared acting skills, they had no real connection. She expressed her desire to be exclusively with me and no one else, confessing that she didn't want to be with him or anyone else other than me in that way ever again. I let her know that she might as well become a nun, as there was no chance of us being together again. I had put my trust in her, stood by her side, and had dreams of creating a wonderful life together. But once I asked her to leave, she made multiple attempts to forcefully re-enter the situation. So I had to resort to getting a restraining order in place until our divorce was officially settled. And at that point, the house was legally mine. About 4 months back, this whole situation unfolded. At that point, my wife, who's 35, and I, 33, had been married for a couple of years. I had a 2-day business trip lined up, was set to leave super early on day 1 and get back on day 2 in the evening. Traveling wasn't a big deal for me, and I'd be compensated for my time, so I didn't fuss much. But after cruising on the road for about 5 hours, the whole trip got scrapped. I wasn't overly bothered though, as I was used to the driving gig and would get paid for it. So I made an unexpected turn and headed back home. Lo and behold, when I got there, I was greeted with an unexpected sight. Another car parked next to my wife's turned out to be her brother's ride. This guy was a beefed-up fella, married with a baby who my wife often looked after. She was all into it since she looked forward to having kids of her own one day. She and her brother were super tight and shared this thing for hiking. No matter the weather, they'd be out on those trails all year round on these epic hiking adventures. Honestly, I wasn't bothered. It was their bonding ritual. I'd usually use that time to dive into my hobbies, like tinkering with building miniature boats while they conquered the great outdoors. Even though I was fully supportive of their bond, I started to feel a bit uneasy about my wife's brother when he got overly emotional at our wedding and planted this huge kiss on his sister's lips. I was caught off guard and couldn't react in the moment. It just happened so quickly. Later on, he came to me, asked for forgiveness, and blamed it on the intense emotions of seeing his sister get married and leaving the family. Once I pulled into the driveway behind my wife's car, I could hear soft music blaring from inside the house. It was a strange scene to picture my wife and her brother in, but I didn't need to picture it because I walked in on them slow dancing together. He was holding her close, their stance looking like that of a romantic couple. As soon as they realized I was there, they untangled themselves abruptly, wearing expressions of guilt all over their faces. Their reactions hit me like a ton of bricks. I could sense my marriage was hanging by a thread. My wife tried to explain that her brother needed some emotional support due to his own marriage struggles, but that didn't explain why they were slow dancing in our living room. As tough as it was, I refrained from bombarding them with questions. They knew the situation was unusual. It didn't take too long before my wife headed out to babysit her baby niece one day. She accidentally left her phone behind, and that's when I stumbled upon her WhatsApp messages. They revealed a shocking truth. She was engaged in zesting with her own brother, exchanging explicit photos, professing their love for each other, and even arranging secret rendezvous by pretending she was going to babysit. It was without a doubt the most revolting and unsettling revelation I'd ever encountered. I hurled her phone across the room and dashed to the bathroom, feeling the urge to vomit. People always assumed they were extremely close due to their struggles in making friends during their younger years and their shared passion for hiking, which was unique to them within the family. I held off on confronting her right away because I knew it wouldn't have put an end to their secret affair. It dawned on me that I was nothing more than a front, a cover for her to maintain her hidden sexual relationship with her own brother. Seeming with a mix of anger and betrayal, I returned to her phone and took screenshots to save for myself. Anguish gripped me as I plotted my retaliation, a scheme that required me to put on an act. The painful part was watching her act so normally when she got back home, as if she hadn't just engaged in a secret tryst with her brother behind my back. I too pretended as though things were business as usual, lying awake beside her that night in our shared bed. The very next morning, I hired a private investigator to gather photographic evidence of their affair. Once I had undeniable proof, I could finally expose the truth, and she wouldn't be able to escape the consequences. Soon after, she mentioned she was planning a hiking trip with her brother, and I played along while secretly involving the investigator. Late that night, the investigator called to tell me that they had checked into a hotel room together along a beach a few hours away. I began packing my belongings because I knew it was only a matter of time before the photos arrived. I didn't understand why they had changed their plans from hiking to a hotel stay, but by that point, I was too numb to care about anything else. I got hold of photos of them strolling on the beach and boardwalk, looking like a newlywed couple, his hand on her rear, deep kisses on the lips, gazing into each other's eyes over drinks at the bar, and even them entering a hotel room, clearly displaying their romantic with my mind made up. I prepared to depart, but not before inviting her immediate and extended family along with friends, including her brother's wife and baby, to come over. I had large prints of the pictures which I strategically hung all around the house, starting right at the front door. As I made my exit, I left a note on the door inviting them to let themselves in. Little did they know that I had already left town to stay at my friend's place, taking all of my belongings with me and having no intention of returning. Once they had entered the house, they called me in a frenzy, desperately seeking an explanation for those pictures. I put them on speakerphone and explained it point by point. These two family members were twisted individuals engaged in an incestuous relationship, likely carrying on this behavior since their upbringing under the same roof. Then I revealed their exact location in case they doubted me and wanted to confirm things for themselves. After some hours, my soon-to-be ex-wife called me, her voice filled with screams and a backdrop of chaos. It was apparent that her entire family and a handful of friends had confronted them at the hotel. Her brother was taking hits from his cousins, and the hotel had even summoned the police. She demanded to know why I had done this to her, and my response was that she had it coming. Her life of deceit had hit a dead end, and she could no longer keep up the facade. I mentioned that the divorce papers were already laid out on the table, and in response, she broke into wails. I chose to hang up. I was already dealing with enough pain and didn't need to dwell on her future. A few days later, her mother reached out to me, extending an apology on behalf of her daughter and son. She gave me an update, sharing that the police never actually arrived at the hotel. Instead, the hotel staff had to intervene and break up the altercation. Amidst the chaos, the brother and sister managed to escape to avoid further attention. The whole family was in turmoil for a while, but it seems that things are starting to settle among them now. Interestingly, the brother's wife is also seeking a divorce along with pursuing custody and child support. As they fled before signing the divorce papers, that's now a waiting game for the time being. I'm darn glad everything came to light when it did, because I can't picture myself dragging that relationship any further without having the facts out in the open. All I want is to shove this mess behind me, and I reckon I'm moving in the right direction. Managed to snag a nice spot, and I'm still holding my job at the same company. Just gotta keep taking it step by step. The whole deal still feels like some crazy dream to me. My wife and I were in the grind, busy bees, when I stumbled upon the fact that our marriage was on the rocks. She was 27 and I was 33. We only had 2 years of matrimony under our belts, but maybe that was a silver lining. On the day everything unraveled, we decided to have a short escape together at a cabin a couple of hours away from home. Once we got settled in, she tossed a dinner recipe task my way. My phone was on its last leg, so I plugged it in and wondered how she tackled this. In the past few months, I noticed she was growing distant, glued to her phone more often, and even slapped a passcode on it. It was weird because we were always swamped with work. So who'd be trying to get into her phone? She used to be an open book with me, but all of a sudden things changed. She stopped sharing about her day. So to see her reaction, I casually mentioned my phone was charging. Without skipping a beat, she unlocked her phone and tossed it over, instructing me to look up the recipe. I did just that and read it out to her. Just as I was about to lock her phone, sealing myself out, a quiet WhatsApp notification popped up. I hadn't realized she had that app. I clicked on it without a second thought, and it took me to a trail of messages between her and another guy. The first two messages were simple. "Hey, how's it going? And I miss you so much. Can't stop thinking about how good you feel." My face must have turned pale because it felt like all the color drained from it. My vision got fuzzy, and I had to get out of the room, clutching her phone. She was busy cooking, completely unaware that anything was amiss. I concentrated hard, steadying my hands that were shaking so I could read through their past conversations. It went back further than I wanted to look. I snapped screenshots of their explicit text, pictures, discussions of their past encounters, plans for future meetups, and even the dreaded "I love you." With her phone still in my grip, I grabbed my keys and walked out without uttering a word to her. As I drove away, I concocted a message to her lover, pretending the getaway was cut short and arranging a rendezvous for them at a specific restaurant and time. Surprisingly, he agreed. The drive stretched for 2 hours, but it felt like an eternity. I pondered what lay ahead for me now that my marriage was shattered. I was already haunted by the thought of any future love interest cheating on me. I also wondered what this other guy would attempt or say when we met. But truth be told, all I really wanted was an explanation. As he walked in, I immediately recognized him from the photos and videos. I followed closely and draped my arm over his shoulders. He flinched away, his face etched with worry. Without wasting time, I revealed my identity and why I was there, how he had taken my wife, and we needed to have a conversation. I guided him to a table, pressed record on my phone, which now held all the evidence from her phone, and urged him to spill the truth. He hesitated, but I insisted this was the least he could do. He confessed that they'd been involved for around 10 months already. Introduced by co-workers, they quickly fell for each other, and within weeks, she was in his bed. He swore she was his everything, that he loved her. I shrugged it off, told him he could keep her. I was done. I showered him with gratitude for saving me from 18 years of child support. I then pointed out where she was and asked him to go fetch her. I drove back home with a heart shattered into pieces. It had been broken before, but knowing how long this had been going on made it even worse. My phone buzzed, and it was the cabin's landline calling. My wife sounded panicked, asking if I was all right and why I had left so suddenly. She mentioned she couldn't find her phone and had forgotten about the landline. I called her out, telling her she shouldn't have shown me her phone if she had something to hide. I accused her of lying and said that meeting her lover confirmed everything. She was taken aback, stumbling over her words to defend herself. I cut her off, telling her there was no need for explanations. I had all the evidence. She started yelling in disbelief, trying to understand what I knew and whom I had spoken to. I informed her that her lover was on his way to pick her up, so she should pack our things. She began to say more, but I hung up. This home, I gathered what I needed to get by for a few months. I had no idea how long she'd be around before she left. Thankfully, we had a prenup, so I wouldn't lose the house or pay alimony. My final act was updating her social media, changing her status to single and posting a selfie of us. As I set her phone down, it started buzzing with messages from confused friends and family. I called up my best friend to pour out my emotions and shed some tears. Not only did he offer me a place to stay, but he also arranged for me to meet his cousin, a divorce lawyer. Before my friend showed up to give me a lift, her lover brought my wife back home. She was mad at me, which was pretty absurd, and kept bombarding me with questions. It was kind of hilarious how she, who was actually in the wrong, acted so clueless. So I decided to play the recording of her lover spilling the beans about how they got involved and started fooling around. As she listened, tears started pouring down her face. She tried to argue that he was making things up, insisting that she never intended to leave me or keep seeing him. Little did she know, he was standing right there by the door, overhearing it all. He got offended and stormed off. I thought good riddance. As he drove off and my wife vented her frustration with loud screams, I told her to grab her stuff and get out of my house because it was mine. I made it clear that the divorce papers would be sent to her parents' place. She just sat on the front steps, sobbing as I walked away. Later on, I heard that she moved back in with her folks after her boyfriend ditched her in a surprising 2 months' time. Given that I had been footing her education bills, she had a tough time making ends meet alone. Her parents couldn't really afford it either, and ended up having her share a tiny apartment with her much younger sister. Meanwhile, I found the love of my life, and we're expecting our second child. Now I can say with absolute certainty that my current wife is loyal, caring, and truly meant for me. I'm grateful that I didn't hesitate to cut ties with my ex and decided not to stick around and try to patch things up